What's going on, people? This is Glendon with the American Hustler Podcast. We're going to talk about something today that everybody wants, and that is success. Everybody wants success, to smell that money, to live the dream. And with that, people are looking for the magic jelly beans, the recipe, the secret ingredient. We're going to talk about the secret ingredient. That's right, I'm going to give you secret ingredient to success right after this message. Below this podcast is a killer, and I do mean killer, hustler special. That's all I'm going to say. Check it out and we'll jump into it. All right, this is the deal. And this really came about from, I'm going to say maybe 15 particular Facebook posts, because I do have a Facebook page, Glendon Cameron, easy to find. And I noticed that the people who hang out in the G-verse are pretty smart crew. And I'm not just saying that because they're hanging out with me, because water seeks its own level. What I'm saying is I learned from these people. And it came up recently, and someone had mentioned it like 2 years ago in another place. Actually was Facebook page. Yeah, it was actually a Facebook page. And it was about my background in sales. And I've never really gone in depth because there was paid sales jobs and there were indirect paid sales jobs. Because everyone's familiar with the Girl Scout cookies, and they go to the mall and they sell their cookies, and the parents send out the forms at their jobs. When I was a kid, in BC, before cable, there were many things like that. School projects, fundraisers. You were always selling stuff. And this was the day and age where parents said, hey, you need to go sell that stuff. Where you went around your neighborhood and knocked on doors and, hello, Miss Jones, I'm selling this, and would you buy? You had to actually ask people directly for money. And we live in a society where solicitation or knocking on doors is really frowned upon and actually can get you in trouble. That wasn't the case back in the day, and that's what people did to move products. That is when my sales education began. Going from door to door with the lawnmower and saying, hey, I see your grass needs to be cut. May I cut your grass? I'll charge you $10. 2 acres, that's like $5 an acre. I mean, it was a lot of work, but back then $10 was a lot of cheddar for a kid. I mean, $10 would last you a few weeks, and that's what you buy something every day. So that was the second leg in the sales process. Then I think it happened because as a kid, I did a lot of reading, and I think through osmosis, from reading just a little bit about Birmingham. If you didn't know, Birmingham was the Pittsburgh of the South when steel was a heavy commodity and was in demand. So Birmingham and Pittsburgh were just cranking it out. Anytime you have a boom industry like that in town, it creates a lot of money for the secondary economies. So there's a very wealthy section of Birmingham. There's always been a really wealthy section of Birmingham. A lot of folks don't know that. It's kind of like in Detroit. At one point, Detroit was the world's second largest economy, like in the 50s. So with that, there were a lot of business people and entrepreneurs in Birmingham. Another history lesson for you. If the racist fools were so ardent about their position, the airport that's here in Atlanta would have been in Birmingham. So those racist dogs cost the city of Birmingham and the state of Alabama billions, probably at this point trillions of dollars. So as I put up in an earlier podcast, there's no profit in hate. There really isn't. But anywho, going through that, looking at that, and not too far from where I grew up was this big concern called Simmons Machinery. And they had these earth movers, the big dump trucks that was like taller than a house. And that was, he was a developer, and he had 2 helicopters. And then right across the street, literally, was Campbell's Pharmacy. And I used to hang out in there and talk to Mr. Campbell, who was a pharmacist, and he let me do stuff around the store, and I got paid. But I grew up watching entrepreneurs. I grew up even, in my neighborhood, every dude did something. He did sheetrock, or he put roofing on. Mr. Giles, he worked at the steel plant, and he would bring home the big drums, and he cut them in half, and he would create barbecue grills, put them in front of his house, put a sign, and sell them. So I grew up in an economy, in an environment of salespeople. But they were, it was hustling. I grew up in a very hustling, rich environment, and I didn't really realize it until maybe a few months ago when I really thought about it, because I grew up with the expectation that you had to work to make money. That was an expectation. It wasn't mean. It was just like, hey, if you need to make money, you need to do some work. You need to do something. So that's part of the sales education, because the first thing is, if you go into a sales-oriented job and you hate sales, you think sales are nasty, you think sales are the devil, you will not be successful. And it's not because sales is a bad field. It's because your mentality is jacked. You are actually going into it with the wrong mindset from inception. And when I got into sales jobs, my big thing was not so much the mindset, it was the training, because I trained myself. And as I learned over time, some of the training you give yourself is great, but you do need to reach out and look beyond yourself for additional training. And that can be in books, that can be through mentorships, that could be through apprenticeships, that could be through exposure to other groups, and that could be potentially going to college or some type of trade school. It just really depends on what you're trying to do. So I went through that phase, and then the third phase, when I was in the military, I was hustling airbrush T-shirts, hustling stuff out of little catalogs. But what was funny, I made way more money from the airbrush and the T-shirts because of I control the materials, and I had the license to create a larger profit margin, because after paints and stuff, I spent maybe $2 a shirt and sold it for $15, $20. Incredible margins back then. And, that was like part of the third, but I kind of went back because in my mind, to be truly successful, you need to be affiliated with a company and all this other nonsense. And then after I left the military, I tried some other stuff. Then I was pretty much in a job situation. Always had two jobs. I had a main job, a secondary job, and potentially a third one, per diem, since I was in healthcare. And when I left all that, I moved into true sales-oriented jobs, where your whole reason for being with that company was to sell products. If you didn't sell products, they had no use for you. And I thought the reason that I was able to weather the storm, because the first 6 months were not like pleasant, because I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of stuff. I got yelled at a lot, and it's very, very humiliating. And I had no intention of ever giving up. It was just like, this is just, once again, growing up in that environment with expectations, growing up playing football where the coaches actually yelled. It's like, you are fucking up. You missed your assignment. I grew up in that world. Going forward, I learned that over all these years, I built up determination. That, to me, is the greatest talent I have. Determination, because the way that my mind works is, if you keep pushing, sooner or later, you will get what you want. But as one of the people on Facebook, and he just put this up, Tom O.D., he put it up that, your success, is it linked to sales? And I said, oh, hell yeah, because you cannot become a good salesperson without going through adversity. There's no way around it. Every really great salesperson has gone through hell, because as one of my mentors, and he was a really good mentor, and this guy's name was Mark, he told me something that really helped me. And he said, let me break down how the sales process goes. There's 33 and a third of sales that you are not going to get. Hidden vendors, they may call you in for quotes, but they already know who they want. And just to make it company legal, because there's company policy, they need 2 sock puppet estimates or quotes. They need them. So you weren't going to get that job anyway. And all that person who was favored to get the job was going to adjust his quote so it comes in acceptable. It didn't have to be the lowest, but it couldn't be the highest. So that was 33 and a third. You just weren't going to get it due to nepotism, fraternization, something like that. Then there was 33 and a third. You would just get from showing up and working hard. You were going to get the sale. They liked you, mistakes or not, you were going to get the sale because you showed up and you tried. Then there was 33 and a third of sales that you were not going to get because you were fucking up. You could have got it, but you were fucking it up. So the way that he explained it to me was you could get 66 to 70% of the sales you go after if you are trained. And I was like, okay, if in the terms of baseball, if you had someone that had was hitting the ball 70% of the time they went up to bat, that would be the highest paid athlete in history. Because that's just incredible. I think, people who are batting 400 are getting $100 million contracts or $300 million contracts. So someone that gets up to they're batting 700 or 725, it'll be crazy. So just to give you an example of how you have to look at your business and how you have to look at anything you want to do. As a forward-thinking hustler, you are going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to mess up. You will lose money. There will be minimum mistakes that will become a chuckle at the end of the day, like, I can't believe I did that. And there will be colossal mistakes that will make you doubt your own sanity because it's like, did I do that? Why did I start this business? And it's those colossal mistakes that are going to make you or break you. And not just in terms that it's a colossal mistake, it's a colossal mistake in how does your mental environment deal with it? Because sometimes people mess up really bad one time, it's a wrap, they'll never do it again, they will not try, and their self-esteem is forever mortally wounded. They just will not really reach for anything high. I grew up with some people like that, they would say things, and I'm not trying to be offensive, but they would say oh, well, maybe God didn't mean for you to have it, or wait, I don't subscribe to that notion that I'm going to sit down or I'm just going to live my life, and then, the big entity in the sky is going to say, hey, bam, there you are, you get it. Because that same logic says, hey, you could be chosen. I am going to make you a quadruple amputee to show the world you're a beautiful spirit. I think shit just happens, but that's just me, and I'm not going to get too deep into that because you're titled to worship or think what you like. I'm just letting you know what I think, and I have bought into make it happen, work for it, think about it, create goals, and this comes back to determination. This comes back to a lot of determination because as I look back, I would go to the door and understand these were people I knew. These were people I saw in the grocery store. These were people I saw at church. And they would say, no. You'd be like, and the door would close and you would feel like 2 inches tall. And understand, I was a kid. I was just like, okay. Then you was like, okay. And there were goals, like whoever sold the most got prizes or special deals. And there was this one fundraiser and they had this lot of books. And I wanted the books. And I, really, as I look back, I could have had the amount of effort that I put into selling the candy and stuff to get the books. I could have put in 1/10 the effort and actually went out and did direct work for money jobs and bought the books. But, going back to what Napoleon said, he started winning battles when he figured out that men would die for medals, which means they would die for recognition. And it wasn't the candy and it wasn't the books. It was the recognition of going through that process. But after being told no, it's just you get to the point. And, I took down all the dating stuff, but, in my previous life, I was pretty good with dating. And once again, it comes back to the same thing. Determination. You go up, she says no. You go up, she says no. She go up, she says no. You go up, she says yes. You go up, she says yes. It goes like that. And I have noticed a marked difference in the backbone of the average American male. They're not as manly as they were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And they just will not initiate. And this is a common complaint with many women. This guy would just stare at me. They just stared all night. They just stared all night because they are afraid of going down in flames. Because you women folk, a lot of times just want attention. You don't want the dude, you just want attention. And the guy doesn't have the social intelligence to know what he's dealing with. So he'll just say, I'm going to sit here with my Jack and Coke and just look at the titties. So you have that process of being extremely determined. You go with Mark Cuban. He says, don't follow your passion, follow your determination. Because determination is, to me, the magic jelly bean of success. It's not talent. It's not resources. It's not money. It's determination. Because if you're determined, you'll get that stuff. And you have people who have those resources, but they're not determined. Once they hit a hiccup, a rough spot, a wall, no mas. They're just like, hey, I'll do something else. They'll do a pivot away from that because it's just, for some people, it is so damning to be told no or to be unsuccessful. And I'll give you a prime example, and it's very morbid. When this recession really started gripping people, there was a guy here in Georgia. I'm not going to say his name. He was a developer, but because now this is the thing that got me. His business was suffering losses. It didn't fail. He suffered losses, which is what many businesses did, and a lot of businesses actually went out of business. But this guy, because he suffered losses and he always won, he was always the winner. He had never, ever had to deal with adversity. It will shock you what he did. He committed suicide. Yeah, I had to pause and let that sink in. He committed suicide. Understand, he suffered losses. He was not going out of business. He was not going to lose his house. He suffered enough losses that he was not going to have his standing. But he was going to be okay. He was still going to eat. He still was going to be able to take vacations. He was still going to be able to send his kids to school. But because he had never dealt with that kind of bone-shaking adversity, he just killed himself. And I saw it on the news, and people were like speaking very delicately about the situation. I was like, oh my God, this dude killed himself because he's not going to be as successful. And there was some other stories. I don't remember them because this one was hit home because it was like literally 20 miles from where I lived. And I even heard there were some people in Wall Street, like traders and stuff, who were doing the similar things, and they were still rich. They were still millionaires, but because they went from maybe 50 million to 10 million, they killed themselves. And I'm just like, what the fuck? And this goes back to determination. This goes back to, winning and losing. Once again, growing up in that era, I grew up in that era where people got in fights, and sometimes you won, sometimes you got your ass kicked. And you learn to deal with adversity without going ape shit to this NIF level that you've got to do this, cataclysmic event to clear your name or to get some type of redemption, because your self-esteem and your ego are so weak that you can't deal with it didn't work out this time. That is a lot of people. I will give you another example, and I giggle and I crack up, and I've learned to be more respectful because so many people are in this group, and you have to learn, one of the 48 laws of power. You need to know what you're dealing with before you engage. And there's a lot of writers in this group. If they write something and they spend their hard-earned time and blood and sweat and tears, and it doesn't sell, they'll stop writing. It was just like, they'll just stop writing. It was like, or the people that wrote and they sent their books through, legacy publishing or traditional publishing, and they would get rejection letter. It's like, I'm just not going to write anymore. And you have these people who allow a handful of people to determine their destiny. A handful, because one of the things that I love about self-publishing is it exposed traditional publishing for the bad business it was. It's changing because it has to, not necessarily because it wants to. And that many of those people that had the determination to keep writing, they put their own stuff out, and some of those people have become millionaires. These are books that were rejected over and over and over by traditional publishing, and they put it on Kindle, and it was like, I'm in the writing world, so I know about this more so than you, but I know there are several people, and I'm going to give you real attainable numbers, who are making $3,000 to $5,000 a month from their writing. And the backstory with that is they don't have one book. A lot of them have 10. A lot of them have 12. Some have 50. Just to give you the proper perspective for you go, I'm going to go to my computer and I'm going to write this one book. No. A lot of these people have been writing for years and they were rejected, but they had an inventory and they start putting their inventory on the market, and the market went like, whoa, I like this. I like it so much. I'm going to buy all of them and I'm going to tell all of my bestest friends. And these people have the writing careers that they wanted. So that kind of shows you that just because this person said no, and this company said no, and this company said no, doesn't mean that you are invalid. It just means that their criteria for judging talent may be flawed. Because just another thing I know, and I was actually talking to a former literary agent at a party this weekend, 90% of the books they buy fail. So if you use that type of information, a 90% a 90% failure rate means they don't know what the fuck they're doing. There is no other business on the planet that can get away with it, and they can't get away with it because, just to give you to you in a nutshell, traditional publishing controlled distribution. Just like the record companies and the radio stations back in the day controlled distribution. The money is in distribution. If you can come out with a halfway decent product, and movies are made, blockbusters are made. Because check it out, when they release a movie, how many theaters is it in? If they release a movie and it's only in 150, 200 theaters, it's not going to do that well. But if I think Pacific Rim's getting ready to come out, it's going to be in 3,000 theaters. It's going to make money. It's got the marketing. So that's a whole nother thing. But with the writing, or with your business, or with your family, you can't allow a handful of people to determine your destiny. And so many people do that because at the slightest hiccup or the slightest hardship, they're out. And this is why I like people who are cancer survivors, or folks who've gone through some real shit. And that's one of the things that inspires me. A lot of people are like, how do you stay motivated? I have so many examples. Like, when I see somebody on television who, like so many of our young men and women who went to Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're coming back missing body parts. And these folks are going out and starting companies and doing stuff. There's this one guy, I don't know his name, but now he's a model. He lost a leg and he's a model, and I think one of those extreme athletes. And then, the guy, I think his name's Jesse, the guy that got literally burned up and he became a star on the soap opera. So if you don't know anything, and I worked on the burn unit briefly, anybody that's been seriously burned has went through a lot of pain in breathing, pain in sleeping, pain in waking up, pain in, and a lot of these folks who are out there, they may still be suffering a lot of pain and they just don't tell you. So imagine going about your life, about your day, and you have this constant pain. It may be a dull ache, or it may be a roaring inferno, and then you go out there and perform. So when I look at people like that, I was like, my fat ass has no excuse. That's how I look at it. It's like, okay, here's this person who's missing a leg. Here's this person who got burned up. Here's this person who's missing important organs because of cancer, and they're going out there and they're doing their damn thing. I don't feel I have any excuses because I'm perfectly healthy. Healthy is a wonderful form of wealth. I don't care. Anyone that's like, oh, you got your health, you are a person with a limited perspective, because health is super important. And a lot of people who are really healthy, they take it for granted. let me tell you something from experience. You lose your health, you will appreciate it. So those are the people that I look up to so much as heroes, not people on Real Housewives of Madness or this rap star. I don't look at those people. I look at ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things because they had to deal with some incredibly adverse hardships. So this is where the determination comes in. I don't think that adversity or hard times build character. I think it uncovers what's already there. That's what I think, and as a person becomes stronger in themselves, they'll show more of that. But to me, once again, the key ingredient to success is consistent, long-term determination. It's just, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. One of my mantras when I'm in the gym is, I'm going to condition my mind so I can condition my body, because that's where it all starts. Your body may be hurting, but the mind is like, yeah, well, the mind wimps out. The mind will wimp out probably 20% faster than the body. And I've learned that because, just give you an example. I'm on this crazy thing that I did years ago, and I'm doing it again. And it's like, you're squatting 3 times a week. And after this first session of doing that is over, I'm going to go up to 4. And the body is like, and the mind, but, I've squatted more in the last few weeks in poundage than I have in like maybe a decade when I was really seriously with powerlifting. So it is a mental thing. It is totally a mental thing, and you have to be determined. Now, another part of being determined, you have to have some real serious goals. Just, I want is not good enough. It needs to be damn near I need, because in life, you satisfy your needs before you satisfy your wants. That is why, I call it crackhead ambition. These people who get on that drug, they couldn't earn $30,000 a year. They're doing that shit a month to supply their habit. Why? Because they need it. Hell, I don't think anybody wants to be a drug addict. I don't think anybody wants to be a fiend or become this person. No one wants that. But once that grip of the drug gets them, and it's a need, they perform at a high level because they have to do it. And then when you put your determination level at a point of not want but need or must do, you're going to see different results in your life. You're going to see way different results in your life because the determination is the key to everything. And another part of determination is when you go through those hardships, your determination abilities get stronger. They get much stronger. Because when I went through that horror of the 3-year period, late 90s, early 2000, 2000, I thought that was going to be the death of me. It was the worst thing I'd ever gone through in my life, and it was horrible, and it just touched every aspect of who I was. Spiritually, financially, physically, everything was hit. And I got through that, and I learned that wasn't the worst thing to happen to me. Watching my best friend die, that was right up there with the worst thing to happen to me, because when you have someone you care about and you can do nothing except just be there, and they'll tell you being there means a lot, but you feel powerless because you want to do more. And then that right there, and then you learn that it keeps going, because once you go through some hard stuff and you come through the other side, you develop what I call unshakable confidence. No one can tell you that, oh, you're this. No, you're just like, whatever. Because you know. You don't think, you don't feel, you know. And many people are circumventing that process because they refuse to put themselves in a position where they may fail. They refuse to put themselves in a position where they may look bad, or, people may laugh and point or say some crazy stuff. And at the end of the day, that stuff's temporary. Even your most debilitating defeat is temporary unless it kills you. Now, that's pretty permanent. I'm just, be real about that. But unless it kills you, it's temporary. So the determination factor is hinged on massive goals coupled with action and consistency. and you could pretty much have a life that is way more incredible than you imagine if you're willing to put yourself out there like that. Just something for you to marinate on. All right, this is Glendon, and I will see you on the good side.